All right. Hey, class. We are back to talk about active transport. Last time we talked about cell processes, however you want to say that word, and passive transport. Passive transport uh, did not require something to use energy to move itself. However, active transport does require some energy to move, and we'll talk about that right now. Sometimes a cell needs to move a substance from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. Because the substance is being moved against its concentration gradient, this movement requires energy. This type of transport is called active transport. Cells use the energy released by the breaking of ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, molecules into ADP, and that is adenosine diphosphate. So let's look at what that means, right? If that's a little confusing, let's look at some diagrams and talk about what is actually happening. So we have the sodium-potassium pump. The sodium-potassium sodium Na, potassium K. And that's because of those are not the English terms for the substances for which the periodic table letters are based off of. As the name suggests, the sodium-potassium ATP ase pump transports sodium and potassium ions and functions with the help of ATP. It helps maintain the required levels of the two ions. Both ions move against their concentration gradient. The cell uses the energy from ATP to transport 3 sodium ions outside the cell and to bring in 2 potassium ions. When ATP binds to the pump, a change occurs in its structure. This changed pump binds the 3 sodium ions. ATP is hydrolyzed, and the sodium ions are released outside of the cell. Okay? A phosphate group remains attached to the pump. The new structure of the pump helps bind 2 ions of potassium and transports them into the cell. Sodium and potassium are essential for many bodily functions, including nerve conductions and muscle contractions. So if you look at this diagram, we have the cytoplasm. This is the inside of the cell, right? Here's the extracellular. Extra means outside. So outside of the cell is over here. And we see that it's expelling, transporting 3 sodium ions outside the cell. And then it's bringing in 2 potassium ions. Okay, and it's ATP. That is split into ADP plus a phosphate group. Okay. Now we're going to talk about endocytosis and exocytosis. Active transport of large molecules in and out of cells requires 2 types of mechanisms, and that is the endocytosis and exocytosis. So we've learned how the transport of proteins via vesicles, they're like little vehicles, takes place. Those vesicles and vacuoles fuse with membranes. The cell also uses vesicles for the transport of other large molecules that are just too large to diffuse across the cell membrane. These molecules include food, fluid, and lipids, right? Which is another, those are fats. Lipids are fats. made by or needed by the cell. Endocytosis has taken place when the plasma membrane folds around or surrounds the molecule moving into the cell, forming a vacuole. The vacuole then pinches off from the membrane. This vacuole can late fuse with the membrane of the organelle where the molecule is to be delivered. So it gulps them up and then transports them. Exocytosis is the opposite of that. So they have something and they bring it to the surface and then expel it. And that occurs when the Golgi apparatus packs large molecules into transport vesicles that travel and fuse with the plasma membrane, the vesicle that expels its contents out of the cell. Then expels, sorry about that. So it fuses and then expels it from the plasma membrane. Cells expel waste and hormones and other chemicals using this method. So endo, it's bringing stuff into the cell. Exo, bringing things out. So here we have another lesson activity. Identify the components involved in transcription, translation, and protein modification. Here's the answers to this lesson. Here are the nucleus. Then you have the DNA helix, of course. Then you have the single strand of RNA. This is the endoplasmic reticulum. These little dots are ribosomes. You have the Golgi apparatus. Protein being released from a vesicle. Modified protein. This is called a vesicle. So it'll take a protein, transport it. And this is the protein if you zoom in. Polymerase. So that's that. And here's a cleaner, a nicer, more edited version. So that's a good picture to have. Save that, right click it, save it, copy it, do whatever you want. And then we're asked about the strengths and weaknesses of models again. The cell model clearly shows the processes involved, and it's easy to understand even if a person isn't totally familiar with the process. The actual cell diagram doesn't show all of the organelles, right? So if it's not involved in this process, it doesn't show them. So it's not the most accurate representation of the cell, and it doesn't show all the RNA involved in transcription and translation. So there are some pros and cons. How could you change to show what happens when the other cell receives the protein? Another cell that shows the process of endocytosis should be drawn as well. So when the second cell receives the protein, if the model could show a folded plasma membrane around the protein, that would be a better representation of what's actually going on. And it can show the membrane bringing the protein into the cell. So that's a good addition. So this is from the warm-up earlier. There are approximately 200 different types of cells in the human body. And although all cells are dependent on other cells to perform body functions, explain how your model supports the statement. So we have the model shows that some cells make substances such as proteins for other cells to use and support their functions. The model shows that each particular type of cell relies on other cells to support all the functions in the human body. So that does make sense. And now we're going to talk about those specialized cells. The human body, it's a living, breathing, natural machine made up of an estimated 37 trillion cells. So just to give you an idea of trillion, that's 37 followed by 3, 6, 9, 12 zeros. That's a lot of cells. Let's see. It's not a great way to visualize all of them because it's just such a large number that the human mind can't even, oh, excuse me. There we go. The human body is a living, breathing, natural machine made up of an estimated 37 trillion cells. All the tissues and organs and systems in the body are made up of cells. These tiny cells are responsible for performing all the functions for the entire body. The genetic content in all the cells is almost the same. So why is a red blood cell different from an epithelial cell? The reason is that these cells are specialized. They're like very expert at their own job, right? The reason is that these cells are specialized cells that function in harmony. So they're specialized, but they work together. And the specialization occurs because of cell differentiation. Differentiation in which particular genes are activated to enable specific functions. So let's explore some of the ways in which specialized cells work together to perform different functions. First, we have hormone production. The endocrine glands produce chemical molecules called hormones. Hormones help to maintain homeostasis and a variety of processes in the body. There are different types of hormones, such as peptide hormones, which have a protein backbone, and steroid hormones, which have a lipid base, so a fat base. Let's consider the hormone insulin. Insulin is a hormone produced by the beta cells found in the islets of Langerhans. And here, I'll highlight that. Langerhans. And that's a part of the pancreas. The main function of insulin is to maintain blood sugar levels. The food we eat comprises many complex molecules. These molecules break down in the body and then release nutrients like glucose, and the level of sugar rises in the blood. This increase in sugar levels triggers the pancreas to secrete insulin. With the help of facilitated transport, insulin enables cells to absorb excess glucose so that an appropriate blood sugar level is maintained. Insulin binds to specific receptors on a cell's membrane. The binding of insulin to these receptors causes a conformational change in the glucose channels. or glucose transporters present on the membrane. The channels open and allow glucose molecules to enter the cell. Glucose not immediately taken up by cells for fuel can be stored by the liver for when the body needs it. After the glucose level in the blood decreases, the channels become closed, with insulin removing itself from the receptor. In this case, the hormone is produced by beta cells of the pancreas, and it has different receptors on different cells. The pancreas, red blood cells, and liver cells function together to maintain blood sugar levels in the body. This situation is similar to how other tissues and organs of the body function. Specialized cells and tissues work in harmony to ensure proper functioning of the body. And in this diagram, you see how insulin works. Here's the insulin, here's the glucose, here's the insulin receptor and the glucose channel. And it's closed at the moment. Insulin is the key that unlocks the glucose channel. So in goes the insulin here into the receptor, and that opens up the glucose channel, and glucose can now enter the cell, right? Think of insulin as a key. And now we have another question. Explain how the model in the image supports this statement. The body carries out critical life functions through systems of specialized cells. And this one's looking at the steroid hormone response. And if we look at the sample answer, this hormone was made by a different cell, and it's now being taken in by another cell using a steroid receptor. The steroid receptor is affecting the process of transcription in the nucleus so that a specific type of mRNA can exit the cell and form a new protein in the ribosomes. This formation wouldn't be possible unless specialized cells were working together to perform this function. Now we have types of tissues. Tissues can be defined as a group of cells with a similar structure and similar functions. Special cells can also exist for different types of tissues. Let's explore the four main tissue types. We have muscular, epithelial, nervous, and connective. Here we see the liver. So now we can click on each type of tissue and learn more. Muscle tissue are made of muscle cells. And there are three types of muscle tissues. We have skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. Skeletal muscles allow for voluntary movement. Smooth muscles allow for involuntary movement. Cardiac muscles make up the muscles of the heart. That comes from cardio, heart. Muscle tissues provide strength and support for the body. They also tend to contract or relax, which causes the body to move. For instance, skeletal muscles shake vigorously when the temperature drops, and this causes shivering. Shivering produces heat that maintains body temperature and then regulates homeostasis. Always comes back to trying to maintain homeostasis. Now we have nervous tissue. Nervous tissues are made up of specialized cells called neurons. Neurons send signals between the brain or the spinal cord and other parts of your body. Depending on the signals transmitted, Neurons can be categorized as sensory, motor, or intermediate neurons. So here we have the neurons, the dendrites, and the axon. And the third type of tissue is epithelial. Epithelial. Yeah, these tissues are made up of epithelial cells. They cover the body's surface and constitute the inner lining of most cavities and organs of the body. In fact, the skin is made up of different types of epithelium. The cells stack together like bricks, providing protection against damage. The skin is protecting, the skin itself is protected from dirt, dust, and harmful bacteria by the epithelial lining. Different types of epithelial cells, such as squamous and cuboid, have different shapes and functions. Lastly, we have connective tissue. That makes up connective tissues, or the type of cells that make up connective tissues depend on their location. So where are they in the body? The most common type of connective tissue is called fibroblast or fibroblast. There are different types of connective tissues such as adipose, bone, blood, and cartilage. Connective tissues fill the spaces between organs and tissues. They also provide structural support for other tissues and organs and hold them in place while the body moves. Adipose tissue is made of cells that store energy in the form of fat. Adipose tissue is made up of cells that store energy in the form of fat. This tissue also cushions and insulates your body. Cartilage is another connective tissue, and it acts as a cushion between joints. So we have another question. The heart is the structure that pumps blood to the rest of the body. It's composed of and surrounded by 4 kinds of tissues: connective, muscle, epithelial, and nervous tissues. How do you think the 4 tissue types support the function of the heart? How do the different tissues types support the idea that systems of specialized cells are critical for body functions? Well, we have the sample answer. Connective tissue holds the heart in place as the body moves. Muscle tissues and nervous tissues work together to pump the heart, enabling it to push blood through the circulatory system. Epithelial tissue protects the heart when the body moves so that other structures don't damage it. The different types of tissues are made of different types of cells, and each tissue performs different functions for the body. These functions support the statement that systems of specialized cells are important for all body functions. That brings us to the summary, and that's it for cell processes and transport. So I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, message me in Canvas and I will upload other videos to help you understand cell processes and transportation within cells and between cells and all that jazz. But until next time, have a great day/week, and I will see you all later. Bye-bye.